Hi folks, thanks for your patience while I'm out of town this second week of class. It's not ideal, but I appreciate you being willing to do some work on your own. And of course we'll cover things, any questions that you might have when I get back in town. I did want to reiterate, hopefully you're taking the time to watch the Dr. Grande video on psychoanalytic theory. It's really very helpful. It's going to be useful information for you, particularly the detail that he provides on defense mechanisms. It's fantastic. So I just want to talk to you about a couple of things. I want to talk to you about informed consent, and I want to talk to you about confidentiality a little bit. This is all information that's in the primary course PowerPoint that's in titanium for you. So you can follow along. I'm going to begin looking at about slide 22 and going from there. So informed consent, just to remind you, is exactly what it is. Before an individual can, is what it sounds like it is. So before an individual can give consent for being a part of the therapeutic process, he or she really needs to provide, it needs to be informed. So I'm not going to consent to something unless I know what I'm getting into, right? So the informed consent process is all about informing clients of things related to the procedures that we'll be using in theater, in therapy. What will we be doing? You know, some of the risks and benefits. What are some of the alternatives? Can I drop out of treatment, or do I have to stay? Am I committing to something? How much is it going to cost me? Will you be, as my therapist, will you be receiving supervision? And if so, will you be talking about me to somebody else? What kinds of communication is going to be privileged, things that you cannot share or will not share? And what are some of the limits to confidentiality that might be in place? So what kinds of things that I share with you might you have to share with someone else? So I need to know all of that. Sometimes it'll even include things like your theoretical orientation. That all goes back to the therapy procedures. But what can I expect out of this process? So I'm truly informed before I can give my consent. In relationship to that, though, too, is confidentiality. Okay, so you'll read in your textbook about something called the Tarasoff case, and this happened at University of California, Berkeley, where a young woman was killed by someone who had basically indicated that he might hurt her, and the therapist just didn't do enough, right? In terms of trying to preserve confidentiality for the counseling client, the therapist made a strategic error, and because of not limiting one individual's right to confidentiality, another person got hurt. So there are exceptions to confidentiality. There are times when we break, or what's called breaching confidentiality. One of those is the duty to warn. So if I'm your client and I come to see you, and I indicate to you that I'm angry and I'm going to hurt somebody, it is your duty to warn that other individual as best you can of the danger of me. Also, if I'm a client under the age of 16 and I indicate to you that I've been a victim of abuse of some sort or neglect, we have to violate that right. So we have to break that confidentiality agreement. Maybe I'm an older adult who's being neglected or being abused. You have to violate confidentiality to make sure that I stay safe. Maybe somebody is a risk of harm to themselves or a risk to themselves, maybe potentially suicidal. That individual might need to be hospitalized, so I'm going to have to engage other people in the conversation, so I'm going to have to break confidentiality. You might receive some sort of court order because you have to testify in court about something, or the information is going to be utilized in a court decision. Well, then you're going to have to break confidentiality. Somebody else is going to have to see it. Or maybe I want to share my records with somebody else. I'll give you an example of that. Maybe I am a student, I'm a young person, I'm an adolescent, and I'm seeing you for therapy. But my school would like to know about some things too. And I'm okay with that, my parents are okay with that. We sign a release of information. So you release your records, my records, to the school to let them know, because maybe the school is my enrollment in the school is contingent upon me getting help or something like that. All of these are what we call limits of confidentiality. So let's talk a little bit about suicidal ideation. Having thoughts about suicide is different than being suicidal. It's not unusual for people to to think about suicide and not act on it. So in so doing, just because I have thoughts about it, or even because I may be deeply depressed, that doesn't mean that you have to breach confidentiality. There only has to be an acute risk. So when we look at suicidal ideation, we look at things like the ideas, then we also think about, do they have a specific plan, and do they have the means to carry out that plan, and is there anything that's keeping them from carrying out that plan? All those pieces work together toward assessing risk and deciding what we're going to do. Very important in this chapter is going to be a conversation about multicultural issues, and I think I'm going to hold out on that conversation until we're together again, because those multicultural themes fit very well with Adler's ideas about lifestyle orientation and that sort of thing. So we're going to hold off on there. But I did want to share with you a little bit about informed consent. That's something that the client and the counselor look at together. The client agrees and they give their consent to engage in counseling. And then also confidentiality, that sacred trust that's between a counselor and a client, knowing that I'm not going to share anything with anyone that you share with me, with a few exceptions. And all of them have to do with harm, a risk of harm to me or a risk of harm to someone else. Then of course we're going to, there's an exceptions in the ethics clause for us to be able to speak to those sorts of things. So anyway, I miss being with you this week, and I look forward to being with you the second week in February. And please, if you have any questions, let me know. I'll be happy to clarify things for you. I look forward to seeing you. Thanks for taking the time to look at this short video this week. Thanks.